Welcome back, weary travelers, to Recorder on the Wall, where we're reviewing every single Redwall book, and maybe a couple others by Brian Jakes. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Katie.
I'm Pete. And with us for the first time, this was the surprise I mentioned, we have Chris from Soma Games, who is the studio behind the new game that just came out.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
I was grateful you guys could come on. So, welcome folks. We're finally rounding out Legend of Luke, Part 3, which has a shorter end than even Mossflower, and we're happy about that.
Yeah.
So, before we get to that portion, we just kind of wanted to give Chris and time to talk about the game, because, I bought it. Haven't gotten very far yet, but this is really awesome that we're getting essentially new Redwall material. It's just not in a book in 2018. So, if you're a Redwall fan who hasn't heard it, and this is being recorded on the end of September, you guys just went officially live a little over a week ago, I think.
Yeah, on the 14th.
2 weeks ago, then. Yeah. And how's it been so far?
It's been really, really great. And I think what I was kind of mentioning before we got the recorders on is we never really knew what to expect. I think all along the Redwall fan base, and most of the time we talk to those folks on our Facebook page, and they've been very supportive for the most part. There's always the folks who you realize you're just not going to make everybody happy, but for the most part they've been really, really nice to us, but also prescriptive in some ways, in a good way. So it's been fun to see people say no, that's wrong. You got to do it this way. And we've tried to keep an open mind. Sometimes there's some conversations take for example whether or not any of the creatures would run on four legs. Sometimes there's just no real textual guidance, and so it's a style choice. But you realize how often folks picture these books in their mind in a certain way. And if you match that, great, they're happy. If you tweak it in some way, at some level they're like, hey, that's not what I thought about. And even if it's not really in the text, it's sort of what they expect, which it's been really interesting. But I suppose to stick to your question, the launch has been really fun. We've been getting good feedback, good stuff on the bug reports, which by good I mean there's not a lot of them. There's always the stuff that you can't miss, but the overall, it's been really positive. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, well, good. We haven't actually mentioned the title of it. If you are interested, it is called The Lost Legends of Redwall, The Scout. It is on the Steam platform. Is it any other platform yet?
Not yet. We just got approval on Friday to get it on Xbox One and on PlayStation 4. So those were already planned, but now it's official, and we have started porting.
That's
cool.
Awesome to hear.
Cool.
Yeah. So you and I talked about this privately, phone call a couple weeks ago. But I was just curious. You guys mentioned, how did you get the Redwall license, and how much had your staff been familiar with it before then?
Yeah. To this, I'll ask a second question first. I personally had not heard of Redwall, so myself it was an unknown thing. There were other people on the team who did know it. In fact, the brother of our lead programmer is a huge Redwall fan, the kind of guy who, knows every little detail and what color the guy's hair was, every little thing. So it was known in the group sort of in general, but not to me. And so the first call that came to us was actually through a kind of a friend of a friend situation who had been okay, so when I talk about this topic, I have to be a little bit coy for legal reasons.
Noted.
If you'll forgive that.
We get there's NDAs here in play, or you don't want to reveal too much about the background process, so you say what you can.
Okay.
We'll take it from there.
So some other person was working on some other project that may or may not have included a movie, but there was a conversation back then. This was going back to 2011, so this was even before Mr. Jakes had passed away, and they were reaching out to some people who did mobile development, because they were considering having a mobile game that could support this other unknown project. And so that's where it first came across our radar. And at the time I'm like, okay, so there's talking mice with swords. I'm sure I could do something with that. And we sort of casually agreed to get involved, it was really very close to that, like within a matter of days, that Mr. Jakes passed away. And so it put kind of the whole process really up in the air, really for years. There was sort of a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen next. Contracts were written and rewritten and revised, and all that kind of stuff happened. And it wasn't until 2014 that we got any kind of a clearance to kind of move forward. So there was a big gap there. But long story short, like, this really fell in our laps. We didn't go looking for it. We didn't ask for it. But boy, it sure changed the trajectory of our company.
Well, that's good to hear. I pulled this from the preview stuff publicly available on Steam on the game, but I was curious. In the game, the main character, the scout, does she have another name? I'm sorry.
There's Sophia is the playable character first, and then her betrothed is Liam.
Right. So you guys, when you were setting the story for the game here, you didn't go with Redwall Abbey or Salamandastron. You chose to make your own settlement, which actually is kind of cool for me because I love seeing background development in this kind of world. So, but kind of was curious, what made you go with your own settlement instead of one of the big two, without spoiling too much?
It's okay. It doesn't spoil anything here. I think really this was a creative choice. When we had the opportunity to write new content instead of covering, like, sort of strictly speaking, covering a book, we jumped at that opportunity. That just seemed like a lot more fun for us creatively, and also probably lower risk. I mentioned earlier there's this bit where if you match what people have in their mind, you win, but it's risky because if you don't match it, you get kind of in trouble at some level. But the more that there's a new location, new characters, sort of new situations, you really minimize that opportunity for dissonance, and you can kind of smooth into things. And so I think if you were watching us as we would post from 2014 onward, we kept teasing things. We're like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? How does this look? And so little by little, we were trying to, one, make sure that we were on target, but also to kind of acclimate people to the direction we were headed. Lily Grove gives us this nice new place, like it's kind of familiar but kind of new, and creatively gives us a lot of room to breathe and explore where people think that it matches and where it doesn't.
We've been over this on our show, but yeah, I love world building by other authors and various fandoms out there. Like, some of the best science fiction books you will find out there is like what's been written for Halo or Star Trek or Star Wars that has nothing to do with the prime characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is really exciting for me to see this in development too. And then, without spoiling too much again, are we going to see either major settlement here, us outside of Lily Grove?
Definitely. So the story arc for the entire first episode does bring the characters to Redwall Abbey. So sort of at the end of the Scout, that's where they wind up. And if you're looking closely, actually, we hint at where we're headed architecturally. Like, the main menu set is actually in the Gatehouse Library, where Matthias used to hang out. So that's kind of our version of that. And so we will roll out different bits of Redwall Abbey in cutscenes and in playable sets as we go, and that's where it's headed.
That's really awesome to hear. Tangential question here, but I was kind of curious, how much inspiration did you take out of the PBS Nelvana cartoon for how you were developing the look of everything?
Frankly, not a lot. Some, and it's not for any reason that we didn't like it or something else. It was because as we worked through our own creative process, we took different angles that frankly just didn't fit with the Nelvana cartoon, and so some decisions that we made creatively, it didn't lend itself to it. But musically, I think it's gorgeous. I particularly like the music in the Nelvana cartoons.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely something. I don't want to dominate questions here, guys. Do you have anything before I move on now on my list?
I'm not completely familiar with the general story arc. So without spoiling it, could you just kind of explain,
sure.
what the characters are, like who they are and what they're doing?
So we start we start the story in kind of a, and this is pretty typical in the books. There's a frame story, right? So we have a character named Jethro, who's sort of the recorder at Redwall at that time, and he's telling his ailing grandson sort of a story from the distant past. And so then we go into Lily Grove is a village, which is maybe 30, 40 kilometers away from Redwall. So it's a village of mice and moles. And we start with this pair of characters, Sophia and Liam, who are they're about to graduate as scouts. So think like a Aragorn Ranger kind of a class.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we start introducing kind of this whole storyline about how you start. It's kind of a typical hero's journey type of story. Like they're about to be initiated into this thing, but then Clooney's crew attacks Lily Grove looking for supplies. So these are pirates doing pirate things. And then
it happens in that world, yeah. So.
Yeah. And so then there's the conflict that arises from there. We introduce a Werret as the kind of the big bad in the story. And then they have this sort of like a mission to get back to Redwall Abbey and let people know like, oh, we're being attacked. So that's kind of the big picture story arc. And right now you can only play as Sophia, but in the near future you'll be able to play as either Liam or Sophia, and the roles kind of swap with roughly the same gameplay, but you get to hear more about different kind of world building background stuff.
Okay,
that's awesome. Yeah.
I was wondering, so this is episode 1, you said, has come out. How many episodes are you planning to make the game?
So the story of Liam and Sophia will be 3 episodes, and we kind of modeled this after these reasonably short, reasonably inexpensive episodic model. So we'll have 3 episodes, or 3 acts, if you will, for the mice, and then we have another, for lack of a better word, we're going to call it a season, but really it's sort of a different story. That includes moles, and then a 3rd season that includes squirrels. And all of these stories kind of converge on Redwall Abbey just as Clooney attacks in the first book.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a really cool approach. So, well, that leads to me our next question. When you guys in the creative process, why did you choose this particular time period, like right before the main first Redwall book?
Yeah, we went round and round about that. And I suppose in some ways there feels like a little bit of an obligation to the fans to kind of start where the series started. But it's a funny thing because, you could do it chronologically, and we could go way back to, kind of Martin's time frame and Cotier and all that. But we had lots of choices, and the truth is we could have grafted this story into almost anywhere. But Clooney was sort of formative for me. Like the first Redwall book was the first book I read, and so my head was already in that space, and so it just sort of felt natural. It's an easy place to get people involved, and quite frankly, when somebody someday somehow makes a film, they would most likely start there too. And so to kind of double up on that seems tactically advantageous.
Oh, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, there's a reason the novel cartoon started with the original book, and the only graphic novel we ever got was the original book.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with your point there. So.
But the second...
You already...
No, go ahead. Escape the Gloomer. So we have another product that's out in beta right now called Escape the Gloomer, and it's a retro text adventure set back in the Book of Mossflower. So we're not bound to this episode. It's just where we started.
Awesome. So, what if there are any Easter eggs we should kind of keep our eye out for? Again, without spoiling too much here. So.
Yeah, I think there are tons of them. At least we have intended tons of them. And to be clear, like there are certainly Redwall Easter eggs, but there is also, for lack of a better word, kind of like pop culture Easter eggs. So we try to make sure that we understand this is a picture of a broader world. Gamer culture is all about the cross references and the fun stuff. So we try to include a lot of those things. To be candid, we're a little unsure how the Redwall audience feels about those, and we're testing the water. Like, does this feel fun or does it feel weird? Like, have we messed with your thing? So we're kind of testing.
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I would probably appreciate those outside media Easter eggs, because one of Jeremy and I's favorite jokes in a game he talked about once was it wall pot roast, wall chicken from Elysium?
Oh yeah, Dust and Elysian Tale. Sometimes when you destroy breakable walls, you get wall chickens, which is of course the reference back to like Castlevania way back in the day.
So I mean, or if we saw a Konami code joke, I know I would bust out laughing if that happens in your game. To be certain.
Yeah, I'm a big video game history and just game junkie, and so like my current favorite series is the Hyperdimension Neptunia games, which make reference to the most obscure things you've ever heard of or never heard of. Like they reference the Bandai Apple Pippin console in one of the games, so it's like I like those little goofy things or references to like Zelda and stuff like that.
Yeah, watching Ready Player One was like part of the fun was pausing it everywhere just to see all the stuff. It was so fun.
I always thought that movie had to be a licensing, like a copyright nightmare.
Oh my god, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're talking the same Hollywood culture that Warner Brothers and Disney stopped fighting for 2 seconds just long enough to make Roger Rabbit, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And if you've ever gone into the history of that movie, the two companies only agreed to do this if their shared characters had to have the exact same amount of time down to the nanosecond.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've already mentioned this, kind of like the overall fan reaction has been generally positive with you guys so here. And I'm really glad to hear, because as you mentioned, one of the biggest problem with fandoms is that if you don't get there will be people who, like, if you change one little thing just to match how the game or book, TV show, whatever will flow, they riot.
Yes.
I think the Transformers term is truck, not monkey, as I recall, when Beast Wars came out, and Optimus Prime was no longer a truck, he was a gorilla. So,
wow.
But yes, I'm really glad to hear the fandom has genuinely been supportive. Certainly, we're happy to see this come out because, hey, new Redwall material. I will never say no to that.
You know, one of the big feelings like that we've done something well was when the Redwall Wiki started covering us as canon. They're like, no, this is the official story. And I suppose,
cool.
I was like, wow, that's awesome. And then somewhere just recently, there's a Wikipedia page that showed up about our game, and that feels like we've arrived at some weird existential level. So that's been really supportive.
Actually, no. The Wiki's official Twitter put out the other day, like, guys, we need article writers.
Yeah.
Editors really bad because now the game's out and we need to cover everything.
I should just give him the script and be like, because we've talked to him throughout the whole project, and he just seems like a really nice guy. He's been super supportive.
I've had minor interactions with them as well. And a few of the actual admins on the official Redwall forums. One of our very first guests, Matthias720, who we're trying to get back on, actually. He's had, long story short, he's had a lot of internet issues over the months. Yeah, when I started building this podcast and basically for lack of a better term, doing market research on the Redwall subreddit, I could not believe how supportive people were actually, oh, this would be a really cool idea, and here's what you should do, and I definitely took that to heart. So
that's awesome.
Well, like all of our guests, I think, like every single host besides the two of us has come from that community. Like Katie, I remember you reached out to us to be on the show, right?
Yeah, I emailed you guys. I was like, can I come on and talk about Redwall? Because nobody else wants to talk about Redwall with me.
So did Drew, and so did the most recent guest, Scars. And for a while we had him, Wilder Tree Jumper, who I can't get a hold of anymore. So, hey, if you're out there, buddy, and listening, we would love to have you back, but I hope you're okay. I do want to ask, how hard are you guys going to stick to the, kind of Jake's big thing? He made species equals alignment a pretty solid rule with some noted exceptions. Again, I don't want you to spoil too much of the game, but are we going to see any kind of gray areas in that?
I'm trying to remember where this cuts off. It's either in episode 2 or episode 3. It's either at the end of episode 2 or the beginning of episode 3. You will meet 2 stoats, and they, as far as we can tell, are riding that gray area, and so that is actually part of the story, and they start to discuss kind of like why some critters count as vermin and some critters count as woodlanders. In fact, there's some obscure dialogue in this episode 1 where the narrator Jethro is talking to his grandson about just this question, and we tried to answer it the way that Jake's answered it. Rather than kind of give it away, I'll let you guys see if you want to find it. But I think partly one of the driving principles for us is that we really don't have any motive to sort of make our own stamp on this world, and we're much more motivated to try to let Redwall exist as he wrote it. And so anywhere that we have guidance, we want to follow his lead. I don't want to change anything. I want to keep it how it is. And so if he spoke to this point, I'm going to try to respect what he said.
No, and I definitely get that. Yeah.
Actually,
fans, some of the.
Sorry, I was gonna, as an addendum to that, I was wondering if at any point with any future games, playable characters maybe would include some of like the rats or stoats or quote unquote vermin species.
I think most likely we're trying to figure out exactly how to do that, and it's kind of a one step at a time thing here.
Oh, of course.
But yes, I think that's probably likely.
Cool.
That's awesome. Now, I do note the game, you put this front and center in the Steam description that there is a food crafting system. Like I said, I'm not that far yet, so I can't really make a comment on it. One, good for you guys for doing and indulging in the absolute food porn that the books are known for. And two, I'm kind of curious, how is this food crafting system going to work out? So
first, if you buy the game today, the food crafting you see is very, very barely there. That's because we want to roll this out with a much more robust system in the near future. I want to make sure setting expectations right. So we kind of punted on it in this episode 1 because we felt like the core gameplay needed feedback. And as much as I appreciate the food, it's kind of secondary. Now that said, it's probably the system I'm most excited about. And I cook. I love food. It's like personal. I really care about this. So there's a book out there that kind of changed my whole opinion about how to do this, and it's called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which is a weird title. But
I've heard of this on NPR actually. Yeah,
it's a great book. And ultimately, it provided us the framework to say I can turn this into a system. And what you have is essentially an unlimited variety of raw ingredients, and that's everything from just water to potatoes and whatever else you can think of. Everything in here, and you measure it on a couple of basic things: how salty it is, how fatty it is, etc. And then through a crafting system that uses heat to transform things like salinity and doneness, basically I can make anything out of anything. And while you can find recipes around the world, and it'll say 2 pinches of that, 3 pinches of that. All those really do is they're sort of prepared things that will give you a quote good result, but they're not your only choices. You don't win because you followed the recipe. You succeed or you fail based on these ideas of how salty is it, how done is it, how complex is it based on vinegar and salts and starches. So I feel like we have this really cool system that allows absolute freedom. You can make anything you want out of anything you like, including stuff that sucks. And then you can share your recipes. And then we allow for freedom that says, this one might taste really good, but has no nutritional value, and vice versa. So I can make a Cliff Bar, which will taste horrible, but it gives you lots of energy. You can make a s'more.
Well,
great, right? But you'll never survive on it. So you can do all this stuff. And it all works. So we've been prototyping this thing, and I think it's really, really cool. And then we have ingredients all through the world. So you get spices, and you get potatoes and blackberries and everything else, and you can put it all together however you want. And I'm fired up about it, but it probably won't go live into the build until October, November, when we're ready to roll it out with the Woodlander update.
That's okay. I mean, we all know, again, we're borrowing a joke about what we made about the cartoon. We all know how nutmeg is important to the Abbey here.
Absolutely.
We can't run without it. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear it. So those are the questions I've got. Jeremy or Katie, do you have any extra to add there? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh no!
I'm just excited that this is happening. I don't own any game consoles or anything, but I'm just excited that there's new content and that people still care about this fandom.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to those console versions because I play, like, I have a gaming PC roughly, but I play more on, like, PS4 and Xbox, so I'm looking forward to those versions, and I'll definitely pick up one of them.
Very cool. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, I'm getting into it when I can. So, well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for answering our questions here. And so if you're tuning out, this is the interview portion of the episode. So, again, Chris, thank you for coming on and answering our questions, and I really hope the game launch continues to do better and better.
Thanks. My pleasure, and thank you. And, I guess if you're moving on, I think that I will bug out now and let you guys continue what you do. But if there's ever any interest you'd like to have us back, just say the word. We'd love to support anything that we can.
Great.
Sure, absolutely. So, all right. Thank you.